Okay, I think I'm recording. I don't know exactly how this is working, but I actually am doing my video today, so maybe that will keep you more awake. So we're going to talk a little bit about 12-step programs, and we're going to start with Alcoholics Anonymous. First and foremost, there's a preamble that is associated with Alcoholics Anonymous. Let me just make sure. Okay, I'm just making sure it's recording. And that preamble says that this is a fellowship of men and women who share experience, strength, and hope with each other. They help each other solve problems and help them recover. You hear that word a lot, experience, strength, and hope. And that is because that's what it is. They're sharing their experience. There are people more qualified that have more sobriety than people who are just coming in. They're able to share their strength and their hope for sobriety. And it's uplifting and encouraging for those who are attending. The only requirement is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees. They're self-supporting. There's no religious denomination, politics, or any other institution, and the primary purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous is to stay sober. Alcoholics Anonymous has been called the most significant phenomenon in the history of ideas in the 20th century. And why is it anonymous? It's anonymous because people are coming for recovery, right? And it doesn't need to be something that is highly publicized. That needs to be a secret, safe place. Not everyone needs to know that people are in recovery. It's their own business. And why the 12-step programs? There is some efficacy. There's also some other ideas about that. But the approach, the support has helped a lot of people. And I can attest to that. I do believe the people who went to meetings when I worked with drug court did have a higher success rate. And I think there's a lot of support when we have a support group and people who are calling us out and holding us accountable and people we can call when we're struggling. We know that that really helps individuals. So the 12 steps also are famous, right? 12 steps can be about anything. We know there's membership worldwide. This just goes through, there's over 2 million just in 2017 members of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is pretty amazing. I may have skipped something. Hang on. Something's weird with this PowerPoint, so I'm sorry it's like this. Okay. As you know, some of the best known programs are AA, then Al-Anon. What is Al-Anon? Al-Anon is for family members. So when our loved ones are having trouble with substance abuse, it is really taxing on family members and they become sick themselves. So when we have Al-Anon, that's a support group for family members to work on codependency and boundaries with family and stay healthy, because a lot of times they're unhealthy as well. Narcotics Anonymous, NA, that's more of a drug focused, same 12-step model. We have an NA and AA here in town. It's not that different than AA. It's just a different focus. Cocaine Anonymous is CA, Gamblers Anonymous, GA, Overeaters Anonymous, Debtors Anonymous, Sex and Love Anonymous. So there's multiple 12-step programs, and I'm happy for you to attend any of those that you find online. So the history of AA, Bill W. and Dr. Bob they had an alcohol problem. If you've ever watched Mad Men, I always think of, if any of you watched that show, when you think about the main character and his alcoholism, it always reminds me of Bill W. for some reason. I've watched a movie about him, and I encourage you, if you are going to work in the addiction field, or even if you're not, to begin to understand this process in the history of AA. I'm really sorry I'm yawning today, guys. My goodness, I don't know what's gotten into me. But so Bill W. and Dr. Bob realized we can stay sober if we get support. And prior to this, in the 1930s, there was no support for alcoholism. And then they saw that it was successful and increased sharing their experience, strength, and hope, which again, you're going to hear that a lot. They wrote the Big Book, and that is a famous book that you can usually will give you a free copy if you go, or it's like $6 if you go to a meeting. The research in the 80s and 90s thought AA was the most effective way, probably was the most effective way to stay sober. There are caveats to that. Oh gosh, I feel like I don't even need to be talking. I keep yawning so much, but AA and NA are compatible with all other treatments, and they're definitely essential. That support is essential for people to stay sober. How does it work? They attend meetings, usually 90 meetings in 90 days. They get a sponsor, which is someone that is like-minded to them. They select a home group with people they get to know, and then they start working the steps with their sponsor. They get a phone list. So one of the things that one of the guys taught me that used to be in my group was, this is the most important exercise you're ever going to learn. It's how to pick up the phone, because we often don't call for help when we need it, especially people in early recovery. And then learning higher order morals and values like service and responsibility to the group and to the community. The meetings are supposed to be warm and genuine. They're not always, so it'll be interesting to see what you encounter. I want you to try a couple different meetings so that you can see the differences and the similarities. The core activity is sharing of experience, strength, and hope, and people must be honest and open-minded and willing to change. There are a variety of type of meetings, so when you do attend a meeting, make sure that you attend an open meeting. You can't go to a closed meeting, and you don't want to go to a step study or a big book study. You probably want to go to an open meeting. There's speaker meetings when people have birthdays and discussion groups. So there's different types of meetings. One of the primary responsibilities or parts of sobriety in AA or another 12-step group is to obtain the sponsor that I talked about earlier. It is a significant difference in clients who have a sponsor and clients who do not. I can attest to that from all of the years that I've worked in recovery work with clients. The ones who had a sponsor who was working the steps with them always did better. And I think that's for multiple reasons. As a trauma specialist, I know that support and having somebody listen to them without judgment and just empathize with them and be like, I was here too. My story is different, but I can relate, and I'm not going to judge you. And we're going to work through this. And we're going to make amends. It's quite healing for your trauma brain in a lot of ways. I can see why, if you have that piece, it might help you through. The problem is getting to that point and or getting someone healthy to actually help you through that. If you don't have a healthy person that can be your sponsor, or if you have trauma that would prohibit you from getting a sponsor, power and control, etc. There's some caveats to this for sure. Working the steps is very important. It helps in the ways that I just mentioned. It helps people stay sober. Here are the steps. And you might be sitting there wondering, while you're listening to me talk about all of these things, why in the world do I need to know this information? Well, you're going to be working with clients who have a substance abuse problem. You're going to be working with clients who are in AA. If they come in and start talking about the 12 steps and you have no idea what they're talking about, well, you're not going to be able to address it or help them. You don't have to memorize it, but you can find a list. You can print this PowerPoint out and keep it in your binder and keep it saved. The first step is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. This addresses denial, promotes honesty and self-examination. The resistance is quite great. Accept identity. As an alcoholic or addict, there's problems with that. And these are the things I want you to objectively look at. One of the principles of this is honesty. But it is problematic sometimes, and I would find marginalized populations especially have a difficult time with admitting powerlessness and unmanageability, because oftentimes the life may not be completely unmanageable. So it can be problematic at times. Number 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. That doesn't have to be God. That you can't do it alone and you need other help and assistance. Sanity is the recognition that continued use of drugs or alcohol will have a negative effect. And the definition of insanity, of course, is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. Step 3, and this is where it also becomes problematic for agnostic and atheist clients. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Can be very difficult. So that practice of letting go in the God of your understanding is important, whether that be a tree, a chair, or something, a cloud, whatever, yourself. That probably wouldn't work, but made a searching and fearless moral inventory where we always lose people. When participants came in and they got to this, it was very difficult. And as a trauma therapist, if we don't have enough coping mechanisms for the individual, when they get to this, they can't handle it and they're going to get back to using. So for you as a therapist, I would be watching that relationship with the sponsor and perhaps that pushing. I like to work with sponsors when I work with my clients, and I like to talk with my client about, please, I would even do a release sometimes so that I can explain or have my client explain to their sponsor why I'm not ready, don't think they're ready for this. If they have a ton of coping mechanisms, then we can work through this. But if we go in and we write a searching and fearless moral inventory of this participant's life, and there's all this shame, and they don't know what to do with the shame, and they don't have a way to heal the shame, and coping mechanisms for the intense emotion, they're probably going to use. So this is really important. Yes, it takes courage. It takes courage, but it also, you need to be smart. So be smart as a clinician if you don't think your client's ready for that. Then you admit to God, yourself, and another the exact nature of your wrongs. This helps with shame, helps you to minimize. A lot of times we make things bigger in our head than it really is. And being able to talk with someone, talk through it. It's why therapy works, right? It helps build integrity. Then you have God ready to remove all these defects of character. So this is where you're submitting to a higher power. Again, problematic for agnostic and atheist clients. So, but it removes selfishness. It helps with dishonesty. It helps with blaming and dysfunctional behavior. And the principle there is willingness. Step 7, we humbly asked God or Him to remove our shortcomings. It recognizes the fact that I am fallible human. Definitely personality disorders can start to subside and even disappear during this because you have to be humble. Then we make a list and we make amends. Very painful and can be very difficult. They have a quote in AA that says, if you have an unresolvable resentment about someone, pray for that son of a bitch. I like that. It helps with love and reparation. Step 9, I already said this, make direct amends. Very anxiety producing for people, but it can definitely help, and they feel like they've done something. Of course, if there would be harm to someone, then that, or to themselves, then that's not okay. And you continue to take a personal inventory of yourself on a regular basis, much like we do as therapists. We observe ourselves. We look at and we're honest with ourselves about when things come up. We're able to admit we have problems. We're able to help to be more intimate and generate generativity. There's that word from Erickson. Erickson, stage of development. Don't forget, from lifespan and from, I'm teaching it again in foundations and theories right now. So then we sought through prayer and meditation, again, problematic for people who are saying that they do not want to have a faith-based organization. And we're going to talk about that in a minute because there are options for those participants or clients. But, improve our contact with God and pray for knowledge for God's will for us. So this is where the spiritual awareness is starting to heighten, and participants are able to draw on that spiritual connection in whatever way they see fit. And 12, this is the awakening that's coming from the spiritual discipline with freedom and feeling connected spiritually, and then moving toward giving back to others. There's a correlation of the 12 steps with 6 elements important to the success of psychotherapy: the release of emotional tension, of hope, and expectation of getting help, identifying with the method or the process, the suggestion and persuasion, operant reconditioning, repeated reality testing, and cognitive learning about the basis of one's difficulties. There are also these promises, that 12 steps. When you hear the traditions and the promises, and you hear it, so we've got the promises and traditions we'll talk about really quickly. So these are the promises. The promises AA gives if you submit to this lifestyle. Like, we will know a new freedom and a happiness. Self-seeking will slip away. We will lose interest in selfish things. And you do start to see that happen for individuals who fully give themselves to this program. I do have to say that. There are some things I take issue with some of the things in 12 steps, and there's some research against some of this, but there is a 12-step Charlotte Castle's book that has 16 steps, maybe more geared for marginalized populations and women. And I usually bring that to class so we can talk through it and see how the language is different in that. It's more open. The 12 traditions are to the group what the 12 steps are to the individual. They're a set of organizational principles that prevent the group from destroying itself, which we know can happen. So here are those traditions right here. Our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends on the AA unity. The group purpose, there's one authority, a loving God. Our leaders are trusted servants. They do not govern. So these are the traditions, kind of the governance of the organization, and that respect for the traditions is really important. And they deal with the unity of the group, not affiliation with any kind of denomination or church or political organization, that they have the same protocols for each group across the world, that they're run the same way. They're self-supporting, no opinion from outside, and anonymity, etc. The progression of the 12 steps is usually 1 through 3. That's that admitting that you have a problem and surrendering your life. 4 through 10 is self-examination, like searching and fearless moral inventory, talking it over, admitting your shortcomings. And then 11 and 12 are service. Very spiritual process, power greater than selves, purposely vague definition gets a little bit more, a little less vague with God and him and stuff, and different pronouns, which can be very problematic for some of your clients. Amends and restitution is important. It restores balance with the people who've been betrayed, and there is a ton of betrayal with addiction. There's you lose your loved one, essentially. And as being on both sides of it as a therapist, I am on the family side, and I've been on the person who's suffering from addiction. And it's hard. It's hard to watch loved ones go through that pain of wanting their loved one back. And so they hurt, and they don't mean to. And that's because the brain has been hijacked by the drug or the drink. So it's not intentional hurt. Most of the time. So I do talk about that a lot to give empathy to the person, but there's a lot of restoration of balance for the violations that have been committed against the family. And then there's humility. When people are often using their very full of themselves because of the way the brain works, we're really essentially, someone who is addicted to drugs or alcohol is essentially operating an id. Remember the Freudian, the id and the ego and the super ego. They're essentially in field due, they're pleasure principle, they're in the low moral, Kohlberg's moral development theory, they're in the bottom rung, kind of just like, what can you do for me? Pain versus pleasure. And but they weren't always that way. So try to get us to try to see them as humans. Serenity is something that AA offers and touts as something that is attainable. The capacity to remain serene in the face of catastrophe, which is what we ask you to do as therapists. They have a prayer that you may hear and have known, that as God grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that is a coping prayer, and one you can use with clients. Gratitude. There's a huge focus on gratitude in the AA program. When we focus on gratitude, then it helps us to focus on a different mindset, and it's really just cognitive behavioral therapy. But you don't have to tell anybody that. Our little secret. Service work, setting up. Begins with meetings. They may volunteer to set up, make coffee, greet people, clean up. Continues with the home group, being secretary, chairing meetings, 12-step calls when people are in crisis. Committee work. Doing different things to help the AA as a whole. There's a focus on the service and healing, being able to handle issues that are happening in the group, and being able to lend a hand to others. Here are some slogans that you'll need to know. The man takes a drink, the drink takes a drink, the drink takes the man. Let go and let God. Easy does it, but do it. One day at a time. These are all things you've heard from movies, literature, and you've heard just slogans, but they come from AA. Utilize, don't analyze. Principles before personalities. Stinkin' thinkin'. And again, that's on there twice. Al-Anon clubs. Al-Anon. That's not right. Al-Anon. That's wrong. Al-Anon. These are, I don't know what that's supposed to be. Al-Anon, I think. Sorry. Okay, hang on. Sorry, I was thinking that was supposed to be Al-Anon, but it's Al-Anon. It is an actual owned and run club that's run by 12-step members. It's not a part of the 12-step community, but it provides a social and recreational environment for people in recovery. So, sorry, I had a little moment there. Okay, research conclusions are that 12-step groups are normative organizations that help members experience, express, and manage feelings, just like in therapy, right? This is like a big group therapy container is what's happening, just with lay people as mentors and support people. And in that, there's nothing but support while they work through their trauma and try to stay sober. They learn to self-regulate in their brain the longer that they stay sober and the more support that they have. And they have relationships where they healthier relationships they've never had before. They find purpose and meaning and increased ability to listen and be there for others. There is a central office of AA, and in those offices you'll find information, literature, and books. Also, literature is all meetings that you go to. If you're going online, they would send you some, or you can go to the clubhouse here at Self Help Harbor and pick some up. Here are some references and some guides and books for you to check out. And in conclusion, working on 12-step program of recovery is not easy. It requires a lot. Can you imagine going to a meeting every day for an hour and then being asked to examine everything in your life, get a sponsor, talk to someone you've never met in your life, and be honest, brutally honest with a group of strangers? It is not easy. And for trauma survivors, particularly, and most substance abuse, there's a comorbidity of trauma and substance abuse, like 90+%. So, especially this AA, and we can talk more about this when we get to class, tends to work well for white males. It can work well for other individuals as well, but often there's a higher dropout rate because it was created by white males. And a lot of the language can be problematic. There are a lot of benefits, though, and I think you see some of our words here from Eric Erickson, like generativity and integrity. And for sure, being a part of a program like this, no matter what, I mean, if all of us gave our lives to this program, we probably could have that mature growth and development just based off the community that we would obtain from being a part of it. So with that, I conclude my 12-step presentation for all of you. I hope you enjoyed actually having my face on the screen this time.